Well, hello, everybody. We're going to get started in just a few minutes, but want to say thank you for those of you who have already joined. In the registration, when you signed up for this, we sent you a document, just a little worksheet that we wanted to have for those who like to interact on the webinars. You can take notes about your sales team while we talk about this. If you did not get that, could you please let us know in the chat? And our Omnia webinar producer, Emma, will send it to you in email. So please let us know if you have not received that document and are interested in having that at your side while we go through this today. Right, I'm just looking at our logins, and I'm going to give it about 10 more seconds and then we'll get started. All righty. Well, thank you everybody for joining us today. I'm Heather Snyder, and we'll do introductions in just a moment, but I want to welcome you and say thank you for attending the Yin and Yang of Sales. This is all about creating a winning sales manager, sales rep relationship to drive sales success. And I couldn't be more happy to be here with my colleague today. Before we introduce ourselves, we would love to know what role you're in. We've got lots of attendees. We also see that we've got some former colleagues attending with us today who we've worked with in the past. So thanks for coming. Always nice to see friends. So chat with us, interact with us, keep us honest. I'm going to open up a poll now, and I'd love to hear what role you're in. We would love to know what role you're in so that we can best shape this message today to the people on the call. So are you an owner of the business, an executive in the business? Are you on the HR team? Are you part of learning and development? We saw some learning and development questions in the pre-registration. Are you a sales leader or are you a sales representative? So, and the responses are coming in.
I love seeing some of these names I haven't seen for a long time.
Great. And we've got some people in the chat as well responding. So we've got VP of Sales, Recruiting, a branch manager, Director of Branches.
Did the poll open, Heather?
Yes.
Okay.
We've got 11% are in the executive owner category. That just shot up to 18%. We've got one person who's in learning and development. And then we've got 5 sales managers and 3 sales reps attending. So a nice mix.
Great.
Of sales leadership, owners of the business, sales representatives, and then again in the chat, management, vice president of sales, and recruiting. So wonderful to see. Well, let's dig in. So my name is Heather Snyder, and I am the Chief Revenue Officer of the Omnia Group. I just joined in February. I have, though, spent a good bit of my career, over 25 years, in the human capital employee development space. I have a passion for people development, and aligning people with the performance of an organization. Currently at Omnia, I lead sales, marketing, and client services. And over the path of my career, I've been in training and development, consulting, and primarily, though, I've spent most of my career either selling directly or in a sales leadership role. Today, I am joined by my former colleague and proud to say my personal friend, Karen Allender, who I would just describe as an all-in-out sales superstar. Karen and I worked together for over 15 years in one of the most magical experiences I was ever grateful to have, leading a very diverse sales team. And Karen and I, over the years, built a very successful sales leader relationship, as well as one that was highly special across our team, where there was mutual trust and respect, and we really developed into a high-performing team. And now that I'm new to Omnia, about embarking on the same exact journey and hosting this webinar, I thought I couldn't think of a better person to join me today to talk about our experience and how we can bring that to life for you. So I'm looking forward to sharing the stage with you today, Karen. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I don't think I'd call myself a sales superstar, but who am I to disagree with the moderator today? So thanks, Heather.
It's what we'll always refer to you as. So just a little bit about Omnia. This isn't a real plug for us. It's about getting into the sales and sales leader role. But if you're not familiar with us, just a little context. We have been around since 1985, and we are in the business of providing organizations tools, resources, and customized services to help organizations hire the best people and make sure they're developed to their full potential. We have a scientifically valid workforce assessment that we will dig into today with over 200 specific job benchmarks across a variety of industries.
Beautiful. So let me kick us off by just kind of walking through the agenda for today. So we're going to start off by Heather walking us through Omnia's sales assessments and really looking at what are the strengths, the challenges, and the motivators for different key sales roles. But then we're really going to talk about, Heather and I, as she said, worked together 15 years. So how did we apply having the knowledge from assessments to create this really high-performing sales team? And so we'll talk about how we leverage that data. As Heather mentioned, there's a worksheet. So as we're talking, really think about your sales team. If you're a leader, think about the people who work for you. If you're a frontline contributor, think about how you can leverage the versatility of this in your day-to-day working within your organization. We got lots of questions before this webinar. Thank you for sending them in. We've really thought about them. We're going to try to incorporate answers to many of them, but we'll also call out some of the questions as well and answer them. And feel free to answer or put more questions into the chat. We'll try to take those too. So Heather, I'll turn it back over to you.
Sure thing. One of the questions that we got that I am positive we'll be able to address all the way through is what is it that a sales leader can do to ensure a salesperson's success? And I was going to say, I'd like to hear the flip side of that too, of what can a salesperson do to ensure sales success, right? It is that mutual relationship, and that's at the heart of what we're going to talk about today. So when I joined Omnia, a lot of my friends and former colleagues kind of chuckled because they're like, of course, Heather joins an assessment company. And I just truly believe in the power of self-awareness. And this model is at the core of what Omnia believes in. First, we talk about self-awareness. And self-awareness is a critical tool to help us reach high levels of job satisfaction. Self-awareness makes us better as salespeople, leaders, and helps us develop improved relationships with colleagues, clients, our leadership. Having a high level of self-awareness also is tightly correlated to productivity and happiness. The key, though, as we develop self-awareness, we become aware of others. We become more aware of our unique traits. And we also realize that our traits might not be the same traits as somebody else's. And we may have key differentiators between each other. And it doesn't stop there. It's not okay to just say, well, I am who I am. I do what I do. That is who it is. Or I am, that is what it is. That's not okay. If we're going to continue to evolve and to reach that higher level of productivity, we really have to take the self-awareness and the awareness of others and learn to adapt and apply it. So if we have a strong concept of who we are, we understand who our clients and our colleagues and our leaders are, we can adapt to situations and to people much more successfully. So how do we help organizations do that? At Omnia, we measure 4 specific key distinct profiles or personality traits. It's called the Omnia Profile. And if you look over to the right of this visual, you'll see columns. And the way we measure these traits comes out in your column height. So as I talk through this, you'll hear me referring to the height of a column. The measures that we look at are around 4 key personalities: level of assertiveness, which is column 1 and 2, communication style, columns 3 and 4, pace and adaptability, columns 5 and 6, and the need for structure, columns 7 and 8. So I'm going to walk through each of these pretty quickly. And when I do that, I'm going to talk through what the columns mean, how do they differ from each other, and then what are the strengths, what are the challenges, and key to a sales leadership position for those of you in a leadership role, how do you motivate these different personality types? And all of this is going to be in the context of sales. We measure these across any kind of career or role. The Omnia Profile can look at any kind of job you're in, but for the purpose of today, we're going to talk about sales styles and sales traits. So digging into it, a level of assertiveness, a high column 1, is a very assertive personality type with a take charge approach. These people are proactive, assertive, and when you think about sales, have no fear asking for the business, always asking for the business. Now, a challenge of a high column 1 is that they can come across a little too aggressive. That assertiveness can bleed into aggressiveness. They also can have difficulty backing away. I like to share an example. When I first started in my career and I got some feedback for the very first time from my manager, she told me that I was overconfident. And it really set me back. I thought, overconfident, what's wrong with that? I've been told all my life from my parents and my teachers that that was a good trait to have. Well, what she helped me see, and I will forever be grateful for, is that overconfidence was having a negative impact on my clients because I wasn't listening. I was always coming across like I was always right and always sure. And it was having a negative impact in some of our team dynamics because I was always the one to speak up in the meeting and had to have all the answers and was keeping others from necessarily expressing their opinions had they differ. So that was a gift that I was given early on. And when I saw this assessment and these traits, I thought, yep, that's something we with a high level of assertiveness have to look out for. So how do you motivate someone with this high level of proactiveness, assertiveness, take charge? Well, first of all, they are very motivated by individual goals. People with a high level 1 like to win and want to know we're winning. Also, advancement opportunity is key. But I will say a warning that this doesn't mean promoting a really good salesperson into a sales leader position. It just means giving them opportunity to stretch and grow and be challenged. So it could be giving them the opportunity to take on a new market, giving them an opportunity to take on your most significant clients, something like that. So moving over to the next column, when we're talking about assertiveness, the flip side is someone with a higher column 2 who is more collaborative. The strengths of a column 2 are they are supportive, team-oriented. So instead of a me, it's we. They're very helpful. They love to be there for the team, help their colleagues, help their clients. Challenges that someone who's got this style, though, is they may not take charge in new settings. They may not speak up when they are maybe not sure of their opinion or comfortable doing so in a crowd. How do you motivate someone with a high level 2? Team goals for sure, team wins, team successes, and giving them collaborative projects to sink their teeth into. Next, let's talk about communication. This is the second area that we measure. A high column 3 is expressive. Their strengths are building rapport and creating enthusiasm. This person can make anybody feel passionate about anything they're passionate about. The challenge is they may not be great listeners. They may not be great at overcoming client objectives. Why? Because they're not listening. They're not listening to what the client's objecting to or what the concern behind the concern is of that objection. So that can be a challenge. Highly expressive social communication people love to network. So one of the things I like to say, and we had a lot of questions about leading in a remote work environment. During these times, if you've got a team with high column 3, check in on them. They're not doing real well, probably with not being able to go out, not being able to network. Find ways to get them together, to collaborate, have more team huddles, do more conference calls. I know we're a little zoomed out, but find ways to mix it up. Even if you just do a happy hour or create a client networking event virtually, that's just fun topics. Your high column 3s will respond really well to this. They also love public recognition. So find the ways to promote the wins and highlight their wins. On the flip side, on the communication style is someone with a more analytical approach to communication. Their strengths are they are very objective, data-driven, and really enjoy the facts and digging into the facts and processing the facts and the details. Their challenges can be they're a little unfiltered. They may not communicate diplomatically. Think Shelton in The Big Bang Theory. They also may not be comfortable speaking in large groups. It doesn't mean they can't be developed to do that. Any of these skills, any of these personality traits are natural tendencies. It doesn't mean that we can't develop ways to overcome them or build on skills that we're not naturally at. But someone who's more analytical, not as expressive, may not want to speak from the fly. I like to say that if you're going to communicate brand new news or changes, say to territory strategy, if you're in an entrepreneurial company that pivots a lot, give the information ahead of the conference call if you've got a team that's more analytical, rather than giving them information to process all on the fly. People who are highly analytical are motivated by specific feedback, examples, facts, and figures, and again, really appreciate time to process independently.
Heather, do people with high analytical skills tend to do better at bigger deals, longer sales cycles?
They can. They certainly can. I think the key when you're talking about different sales cycles, sales cycles and sales styles, is analyticals. People with an analytical preference are going to be better at team sales, where you've got a collective group of people working on big deals. Think about if you've got sales roles in your company that are more like a sales engineer, technical support, sales solution architect, for sure, are definitely helpful and collaborative in those approaches.
So if you've got your worksheet, this would be a good time to kind of just pull that out and just take a minute and think about the sellers on your team and where are they falling in these categories. So just take a minute and take a note while we talk here.
And we've got a great question in the chat from Jamie about, is there an ideal profile? We're going to cover a lot of different profiles today. Omnia's assessment actually has 17. We do have some opinions on traditional sales roles and which ones make a good fit. So once we get through that, we'll cover that. And if I don't, Jamie, come keep me honest and take me back to it. But that is the plan. So the next level of trait we look at is pace and adaptability. This is columns 5 and 6. A person with a high level of pace, a high column 5, is very expeditious. Their strength is juggling multiple priorities, adapting to change. They can deal with a lot of different deals going on at different stages. Challenges of someone with a high level of pace could be overextending, overpromising, overcommitting, as well as maybe being impatient for those who don't move as quickly as we think we can move. Motivation for someone with a high level of pace, expeditious trait is short-term goals, setting short-term goals and celebrating the milestones along the way, as well as variety. A person with a high pace does like a lot of variety in terms of their client base, their deals, their sales cycles, and projects they may get involved in. On the flip side of this personality, you've got a sales style that's more systematic. The strengths here are being very methodical, very good at following up and following through, remembering what we promised and then delivering on every one of those commitments. The challenge for someone who's not as expeditious and more systematic is that they may not adapt as quickly to shifts in priorities, handling interruptions. Again, I like to say, particularly when we can't see people as much and we are all working in this remote setting mostly, people and things are coming at us in different ways, right? We're communicating on Teams more than we ever, maybe Slack, IM, other forms of it, Skype, email, text. People with a systematic profile don't necessarily handle those interruptions very well. I was just recently coaching someone with this trait, and I just gave her permission. Shut it off. Go on Do Not Disturb. It's okay. Live into what you do best, and your colleagues and your clients will value that because you're there when you can be. The motivators for someone with this profile is time to see projects through and a more stable, predictable environment, which may not be possible. So just having a sales leader that understands that and does everything to help the person be comfortable with that is really key. And then finally, our last trait we measure is the need for structure. These are columns 7 and 8. A person with less need for structure is actually a high column 7. They're known as more autonomous. These are your outside the box thinkers, decisive and highly resilient. The good thing about a high column 7 is they can take no over and over and over again and bounce right back for the yes. So it's a good trait to have, again, in a sales environment where we face a lot of objection to what we're trying to present, especially for newer markets, newer products. The challenges with a highly autonomous, decisive, resilient person is not necessarily great at details, and also certainly not a rule follower. We look at rules as guidelines and rules that can be bent or stretched for the client's situation or to get that deal. So motivation for this kind of salesperson is latitude to reach goals and independence to do it in the way they can. I remember when I first took on my very first sales manager job, my sales leader at the time, and still one of my mentors, said that one of the things he thought I might be the most challenged with is that I may think the salespeople on my team will only be successful if they sell like me. And that as a good sales leader, you have to realize that people will get to the outcome in various ways. And as long as they don't, hurt anybody in the process or damage a client relationship and they make the deal, it's probably okay to let them have that freedom. So if you've got a team of high autonomous people, that freedom is really important, not micromanaging. On the flip side, there are some by-the-book sales styles who have a very high attention to detail, very structured, and have a commitment to accuracy. These are really key roles in terms of maybe long-term technical sales, where we're talking about business case development, long RFP cycles, and high dollar sales that are going to make or break a company's budget and decision, with that decision that they make and the outcome being so important. So that accuracy is key. The challenges with someone with a high by the book is really want everything to be perfect, and they expect themselves to be perfect too. So they can be very defensive if they're given feedback or have to face rejection and can take that very personally. People with a by the book really want resources to be able to do the job and do it right, time to do it right, and clear expectations of what success looks like. So that's a lot of detail. Karen, anything I didn't cover before we get into now, how do we coach these different styles?
No, I think we're ready to jump in.
Great. Let me just get caught up here on my notes and make sure I'm ready for the next segment. So the key here is, like we said, at Omnia, there are 17 different sales styles, and it's not an all size fits one leadership approach.
No, it's not. And it's interesting because, as Heather said, they've got all these styles, and that they can certainly help you as you look at your business and what's your sales process look like and your function. But if your team is anything like teams I've worked on, it probably is going to look more like this slide, where you have 6 different people, all have different profiles. And how do you make a cohesive, collaborative team work together with all of these sales styles? And so that's what we really want to talk about today, and just kind of dig into what that can look like in a high-performing environment.
And I just have to acknowledge, and I love the chat for Jamie, because this message is really about sales leader, but we cannot overstate the importance of this is about also adapting to your client. So if you think about some of these personality traits, if you're dealing with you're an autonomous, big picture, innovative salesperson, and you're selling to someone who's more rule oriented, by the book, perfection, detail oriented, think about how you adjust that style to match that client and the way they're going to make a decision. So that could be the topic for the next webinar.
I'd love that.
So the point here, though, on the salesperson's trait is really identifying the individuals and understanding on your team, like we have in your worksheet, who on your team is what, and how do you think about what their strengths and challenges are and what can motivate them. And then thinking about where are they and where do you want them to be to create some development and action based on this insight you have. So the key then is developing an action plan. So we're hoping that what we've given you today with this worksheet, you'll jot down some notes of some key takeaways around your team. We also thought it would be fun to show you our profiles.
Yes, so this was really interesting. So Heather, before this webinar, had asked me to take this particular assessment, and then we compared our assessments side by side. And so you'll notice here that Heather and my assessments are almost identical. The numbers are a little different, but we're both in this high 1, 3, 5, 7 category, which means they call that the visionary sales, and it's proactive, assertive, asking for questions, good relationships, but good communicators, and fast-paced. And so you would think that me working with Heather for all those years, it would have just been, easy peasy. But I'll tell you, you put Heather and I in the same room, and that's a lot of assertive happening there. So whether your profile is very similar to your sellers, or in this case, your leader, or whether they're very different, the key is that versatility. So let's kind of talk about what it takes to really create this high-performing sales team. So in really thinking about the time that we worked together, I came up with essentially 3 things that we did, leveraging the knowledge of these assessments that made our team so successful. And it was all about this versatility of differences, and as a leader addressing that. But what we discussed, Heather and I, was that before you can start to vary the treatment by different style, the first thing a great leader has to do is create a foundation of fairness and accountability. So that can't be optional. Everyone has to be held to high standards, have good accountability. There has to be a set of what we called the basic principles that we all agreed to work on for a collaborative environment. And then once you create that very solid foundation of fairness, then you could start to vary the treatment to meet the needs of each individual person on that team. So the second bucket here, treating each seller as a unique individual. Let me kind of break down, what did that actually look like when we did that well on our team? And we didn't always, but when we were doing it well, what did it look like? So the first is capitalizing on a seller's strength. So, for example, you saw on my profile, very high assertiveness, right? I'm the kind of person that is going to find a way to get in front of a key prospect. Of course, perhaps following one of the sales VPs into a bathroom was a little overkill. At least it was a woman, so I had that going for me. But I was going to get it. So what would really annoy me as a seller is if my leader were, hounding me about, did you get in front of this person? Because I was probably thinking about it at 2 a.m, and I was thinking about it in the shower, and I was definitely thinking about it on the way to work. So a sales leader needs to support that strength, but trust that strength in that assessment. Where I really needed help was on my challenges. So as a high assertiveness, for example, I had a very hard time letting go, especially if I saw a client that had a really strong need for what we sold. If I knew I could help them, I was like a dog on a bone. And so there were a lot of times where Heather had to, but she also knew that it had to be my idea, right? Because I'm very autonomous. And so a good sales leader could never say to me, like, just drop that client, you're never going to close it, because that would just embrazen me. So instead, she would ask me great questions, let me come up to the idea that it was probably time to move on from that opportunity. And then I could do it. But it was because she had the knowledge of the assessments and knowing my style that she could morph what it would take to do it. Because she wanted to go after it too, because that was her style.
Karen had a particular retailer she absolutely loved, and she was their customer. She loved them, and she was just sure they were going to become our customer. Yeah. And they loved Karen. They loved having Karen come speak. They loved having our team come meet with them, but they were sending no buying signals. So that was the one I'm thinking of as you talk about this.
That's a great example. Heather. Another challenge or opportunity for me because of my profile is I'm very comfortable moving very quickly. And I just would expect all my customers to do that. And as I think it was James had asked, we really should be thinking about our customers when we think about our styles. So there were a lot of times when I'd be ready to go for the close, or I'd be frustrated because it wasn't closing. My prospects were taking additional time. And Heather would really help to kind of slow me down, first off, and to make sure I was tucking and tying all the details for a more analytical client. So had I provided the business case, had I provided case studies and proof sources to really make sure that that was all happening. And one of the great leaders I had early in my career, Dave, someone you know, actually gave me a plaque that still sits on my desk today that says, "When you've done your best, await the results in peace." And that's a really good plaque for someone with the high assertiveness that I have. The other opportunity within the profiles, really having the data of knowing profiles, as Heather mentioned earlier, was motivators. So I've been on sales teams where everybody was treated with the same incentives. They thought what worked for one seller would work for the others. At one point, we were all given Letterman jackets, I know, which really worked great for some of the sales folks, but not all of us, especially because it had a big red A on it. And if you've ever read The Scarlet Letter, that really didn't work all that well. But what our team would do is every quarter we would sit down, look at our goals for the quarter, look at our gap to year, and then we'd create incentives for ourselves. With my profile, I needed recognition. That was important to me, but I also loved building relationships. So my incentive was often to do a dinner out or to have a dinner at home. Others might have wanted days off with their kids or spa treatments or things like that. So really having the knowledge of what motivates someone can really help you tailor that incentive. Anything you'd add there, Heather?
No, I just have to laugh because I still have that jacket.
And then the last piece, I think, around the assessments that I'd love to share with this group is it took a bit of a leap of faith, but one of the things we did on our team was we shared our assessments amongst the entire team. And not all the details, but each seller had the opportunity to put up what our strengths were and what our challenges were and what motivated us. And what that allowed us to do was to really find the people on our teams who could augment our needs. So I wasn't good at the detail and the data, but Marianne, for example, put these case studies together or business cases that were phenomenal. Well, if you give me hers, I could go replicate it, but I would never have thought of that on my own. The other really big benefit of that was that we could be judgmental of each other on a sales team. Like being assertive, I might say, well, why doesn't that person ask for the order? Or why aren't they pushing harder? Once we saw the assessments, we really embraced the diversity on the team, and that judgmental nature really dropped, and it just helped us coalesce and really build that common bond that helped us be not just successful individuals, but a really, really successful, high-performing sales team. So it was a great experience, and having the data of these assessments really made all the difference in the world for us. So
the other thing I want to add about this magic is that I'll share a story of how this came to be. When we decided to have kids, I got out of sales and I went into a learning and development role where I didn't have to travel as much and just didn't have that pressure of the sales quota. And I was convinced after a few years to take back on a sales leadership role. And I was kind of selected by this team to come lead it. A couple of them, including Karen, thank you, asked me if I would take on the team when the person in the role had been promoted. One thing that happened very early on when we had come together as a team is I was letting them down. I wasn't being the leader they had hoped I would be. And I was trying too much to replicate the leader who they had had. And a few of them pulled me together for lunch and gave me some pretty candid feedback that I was not doing what they thought I could be doing. And it was very specific and caring. And they, supported again, saying how much they had hoped, that I would be a great leader for them. I bring this up because I think that was part of the magic of this, and what I think is part of the magic of a high-performing sales team and a sales leader, salesperson role is that we are mutually dedicated to each other's success. and we're willing to give each other feedback and listen and take that feedback and talk candidly and openly, even when we disagree. So that's really key. And that doesn't exist everywhere. I've since moved into environments in my past where it didn't exist. Thankfully, it does now where I'm at. Thank you, Omnia team. But it's okay to admit when it isn't there, but it's not okay to let it be. I don't think so. We all have to strive for that. So I'd like to open up another poll and just ask if you'd be willing to admit if, are you in an environment where giving and receiving feedback is encouraged, comfortable, and the norm? And just to get a poll of what's it like today in your organizations?
It's such a good question, because it is such a, in an environment where you have a leader who isn't willing to take that feedback, it can be very stifling. So it's such an important part of that relationship.
And this is interesting because we thought this could be probably a 50-50 response. We actually have a 60-40 response, which is great to see. I do think we're evolving as leaders in organizations and realizing that so much that feedback really truly is a gift. And there are also great programs out there to develop your skills in giving feedback, and receiving it is key. So great to see. I think it is really key to this relationship, and it really sets the stage for the next, just last piece we want to share with you. And that is questions to ask ourselves as leaders and to live out these traits that Karen outlined that really made a difference for her in a variety of sales roles she's been in. And it really starts with, have I clearly defined expectations? Have I been clear on what is expected of the team, of the individuals? And that's about performance goals and quotas, but it is also about behaviors. I had team members who didn't want to attend team calls in the beginning or felt like team meetings were a waste of time. I had to be very clear that I expected everybody to be there and to contribute, because that's what makes the collaborative, successful team, is when we all share. Also adapting, and gosh, don't we know this more than ever as leaders right now, but being able to adapt to changing circumstances, and not just because it was one way and just because we had set the course for this path. Things change, as we well know, so you've got to change your expectations sometimes to adapt. And then development is key. So you can tell people what you want of them, but do they have the skills and the capability to get there? So making sure that you've provided sufficient training and learning and development and experiential opportunities for them to do so. And then holding everybody to the same bar. Karen had fairness and accountability on that. Everybody might not be treated equally, but everybody should be treated fairly and held to the same level of expectations that you're expecting them to get to at their level. And then you have to inspect what you expect. And as you saw from my profile, I'm not a detail person. I don't like to have to measure how many calls a person has made. I'm grateful to have someone on my team who's self-driven. But if I've got a person who's not got the volume of activity, I've told them that I expect them to do X number of calls or first time interactions with clients or prospects, then I've got to be willing to inspect that. And then, as I already said, have I asked for feedback? Have I asked them what I can be doing to be a better leader for them, a better support? What's getting in the way of their success? What are the biggest challenges they're facing? And tackling and creating an action plan to address those is really key. So it's one thing to ask for feedback, but it's key to follow through on the feedback. So we got a lot of questions submitted that we can address. We've got a few that we're prepared to address right now, and we'd love to take any more from the chat. So if you've got some questions for us, feel free to jump in. I like the question here from James right away, is what is the value in having diversity of profiles versus simply duplicating historical success in the role? I will say Omnia is a data and analytics company, and we do believe in benchmarks and benchmarking your high performers and what differentiates them from your not so high performers, but it's one piece of the pie. And I think what we've talked about here with the various different sales styles, clients, examples, diversity is definitely something else to factor in. So it's not just about one type, one role. It is about what's your sales environment like? What are your clients like? What are your sales cycles like? And then how do you bring about a team that can truly have that synergy to get there together and help you all be successful?
And it's interesting from a seller's perspective, if we'd have had all salespeople with Heather and my profile, there wouldn't have been anyone there to help fill in some of the gaps for either. And so I was really grateful that there were other types on the team. Now, with that being said, I can actually think about, I mean, there were some folks that did not end up being successful. And in hindsight, had we looked at their profiles, we might have seen they were outliers to what success really looked like. But it was sure nice having some of that variety on the team.
So going back to Jamie's question, and is there an ideal successful profile? And somebody else put that in our questions at the in the registration as well. Is at Omnia, we do have a primary sales profile we look for your traditional quota-based, mostly commission-oriented sales role. And those are people with that high level of assertiveness and that high level of resilience, column 1, column 7. So if you were working with us today, brand new, that would probably be, that'd be one of the things you'd hear from us. But again, with 17 different sales styles and talking to all of you who are in different environments with different clients, different things you're selling, it's really important to assess what do you need for the position? What do you need for the team? What do you need for your clients to be successful? It's not a one-size-fits-all approach for sure.
So Heather, one of the questions that was sent to us beforehand that I thought was really interesting is, how can this be leveraged by someone in kind of an L&D or sales enablement practice?
Love that question. And I love it because so many organizations use this for hiring and then don't think about necessarily how you use it to engage and develop and grow people. So the key here is that you've got now what people are likely to do naturally. That's the key. Your personality and the way you complete assessments like these, if you answer them honestly and what your first answer is, that's who you are by nature. And that's who you are most likely to be under stress, but it doesn't mean that you can't develop to be something else. So the key is, or to build on things that you're not necessarily comfortable with. So key learning and development is looking at these profiles, looking at the developmental insights we actually give you in the report, and you can create learning and development paths for people. And again, be more empathetic, because now if someone's looking at their profile and they know, look, I don't like to go to networking events. I'm not comfortable just walking up to a stranger and having having small talk. Well, that's because that's not your natural tendency. Now, what are some skills? What are some openers you can use? How do you become comfortable? How can you practice that scenario? So there are lots of things you can do to just say, okay, this is this person's natural trait. How do I create a development plan that gets them to where they need to be successful in this job? Okay, we got another question. Do you have a consistency scale or a way to measure validity of the assessment results? Absolutely. Our assessment is scientifically validated. So we know that it is accurate, and we've had it validated twice, Jamie. It's interesting. Most times too, people who take the assessment agree with the assessment. What would you say, Karen?
Oh my gosh, almost to a fault. I'm like, how do these people know me so well? But yet it's really insightful, because there were a lot of places that I knew, but there were things that came out around. I'll give you an example. One was I rated lower on energy than I thought I might have. And yet I thought about like the situation of when I took the assessment and what was kind of happening. And I thought, I bet that reflected, and that was really shocking to me, but it also, it was true. And so I thought that was a really interesting catch on the part of the assessment.
One last question we got from Justin Albertson I really liked is, how are sales managers adjusting to how they coach during the pandemic? And I think that is a real challenge for all of us, right? How do we collaborate with our colleagues, and how do we coach in this environment where we can't necessarily go on ride-alongs or do call observations as easily? I think one is we can't use that as an excuse. We've got to find ways to leverage technology in other ways. And I think our customers understand as well, we're doing some new hire development right now at Omnia. And when we get an incoming call now, we just say, would you mind, we're doing some training. I'd like to dial in my colleague to listen to this call. And I think you can do the same thing by having conference calls and having sales leaders listen in. The other thing is leveraging technology to still do learning and that communication and sharing with each other. So have content, subject-driven sessions where you bring people together, but also don't overestimate the non-agenda times. I think it's really important to pick up the phone or send a chat to every one of your team members on a regular, consistent basis, just to say, hey, let's do a touch base, and not have a business agenda, but just a how you doing, check in, relate on, the human level of what's your world like right now? How's it going to, with the kids, online learning, or how are you feeling in your home office right now? A lot of people are dealing with loneliness. What are you doing to overcome that? Or is that an issue for you? So any of those things to just, we have to insert ourselves more to what usually would become natural if we were on an airplane together or having a meal or riding along on the way to a client visit or back. So as leaders, we really have to intentionally create those moments. Karen, would you add anything else?
I think the only thing to remember is that there's also been some really good things that have come out of this pandemic. We're all kind of sucked into some of the challenges, but there have been some good things. And one for me has been that we have connected on the human level in different ways than we would have before, right? Like we're now used to a dog coming in or a child coming into a call, and the world does not stop when that happens, even if you're in front of a client or in front of a board of directors, as the case may be. And so I think just remembering that some good things have happened that we want to take with us and to work through some of those challenges for people.
I remember when we first started doing virtual learning, it was a disaster if you heard a dog bark in the background. And now I love that it's just natural and welcomed, usually in most settings. It's like we have all acknowledged that humanness that we all are. So
absolutely.
Well, I think we're at the time to wrap. Thank you for all the great questions. Really, really appreciate it. Karen, do you want to say some words before I close?
Well, certainly I'd like to say thank you, Heather, for inviting me today, and thank you to Omnia. When Heather asked me to do this webinar with her, one of the things that came to mind was this quote from Edward Deming, right? Without data, you're just another person with an opinion. And for someone like me who's not a data person, that was like, well, what's wrong with that? But I started to think about, especially as it relates to this, having this knowledge was critical in my life, in my selling life, in my work life, but also in my home life, just better understanding myself and others. And so I think about the time that we worked together as some of the happiest time I had, and certainly some of the most sales productive time. And so for those of you who are using this, dust it off and bring it out if you haven't done it in a while. And if you haven't used this kind of tool with your sales teams, I highly recommend it. So thank you, Heather.
Thank you. And just a reminder to draw on that worksheet we gave you. There are some post-webinar reflection questions we would certainly encourage you to look at. And again, if you've used Omnia in the past, I know we've got some clients on the webinar, and if you've used us for hiring or if you've used us for staff engagement before, now is a great time to take it back out, review it, use it as an agenda item with your teams on your calls. And then if you haven't ever done anything like this, of course, we'd love for you to use Omnia, but use something, get the data if you don't have it. There were some questions we didn't get to, which is a great time for me to plug that we have a Ask the Experts webinar coming up on October 29th. And I think Emma, the producer, is going to put a link in to register for that. So if you would like to join us again, we're just going to use that time to answer questions we get on webinars like these that deal with a variety of topics around personality traits and really aligning people with their natural traits to be most successful in their careers and their lives. So thank you. You can connect with Karen at this contact information on this screen. We'd love to continue to hear from you and to keep the conversation going. And to Karen, I can't thank you enough. It was such a pleasure. Thanks for saying yes. Thanks for joining me today. And thanks for being my forever friend.
Thank you.
Take care.
Have a
Bye,
good day.
everybody.
Bye, everyone.